Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Tazri, Stalwart Survivor, and Activated Abilities deck. This has come to us from Dom. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, Dom. And Dom has a few questions on how to improve the deck. Some things about, looking for a better game plan for consistency, a better mana base because it is a 5-color deck, and what kind of options outside combo wins for a deck like that. Now that last question is a little incendiary, so we'll get to that soon, but otherwise I totally see the direction we can go with this deck. I think this is a fun kind of idea, but I will say we do kind of have a natural ceiling that to an extent we're going to bonk our head onto. We all know not every deck can get to infinite power levels, not every type of strategy will make it to the tier 5s or whatever, bracket 7, I don't know stuff, right? So we need to be a little more practical on what we are looking to do with this deck. And so I have some opinions on this, and we're gonna slowly piece by it one by one. And with that in mind, I think that's it. Let's get right into it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Tazri, Stalwart Survivor, and why are they our Activated Abilities commander? Well, they're a 3/3 human warrior in white, but because their activated ability has all 5 colors, this is a 5-color commander. They have 2 main abilities, with the first one that I think is really interesting, and the second one being slightly less interesting, but still good, right? The first one says, all creatures you have can now tap for mana to activate creature abilities, but only if this creature has an activated ability that's not this one. Kind of a mouthful, kind of something an inherent clunkiness that there's no way around. There's nothing we can do about that, but in essence, it makes us really invested in activated abilities. It also makes us super invested in Tazri themselves, because with her, we get to kind of hyper power out a lot of these activated abilities, get a lot of them going, and start taking a lot of advantage. Her second ability, for Wooburg, or one of each color, tap, mill 5 cards, put all creature cards with activated abilities that aren't mana abilities from among the milled cards into your hand. So, I could have a problem with this ability. In essence, the way it's supposed to work is that, her and 5 other creatures, because I guess we can't tap her, sorry, because she needs to tap. So 5 other creatures can help you pay this Wooburg mana. You tap her at probably a pretty discounted rate, maybe tapping 2 lands, 3 creatures. You mill 5 and you put all creatures, ideally all the creatures in your deck have activated abilities, so you put all creatures that you've milled into your hand. And my problem is, I really don't think it is worth it. This is not very strong. If this ability put those creatures into play, I'd say now we're talking. But this ability just puts them into our hand, which means this 3 mana 3/3 that turns on our creatures and our deck also is kind of a glorified divination sometimes, where we can get, 3 or 2 cards off the top of our deck while milling the rest, which may be cards we don't want to mill because this is not a reanimation deck, into our hand. I don't know, it seems a little clunky. There's definitely things we can do to make her a bit stronger by activating her on other players' turns, which we have the methods to do so here, or things like that, right? In fact, I'm pretty sure the only card in here that stops us from playing Zirda as our companion. Zirda says all your permanents need to have activated abilities, and the only one, perhaps I missed one, but the only one that I can see is Quest for Renewal, and Quest for Renewal specifically does not have an activated ability. And to give up our commander for a card that specifically allows us to keep untapping creatures on our opponent's turn tells us that we're very invested in that ability, right? Okay, so let's quickly look at our land count and curve. Our land count is 38. I think that's fine. We have a very big investment in green ramp and 2 pieces just one piece actually, no soul ring, of artifact ramp, which I like. And then when we come to the curve itself, we're very, very, heavy on 2, and then we scale nicely out. I don't mind this. Obviously, I'm sure you can pick up. One of the things I think is a problem is we have very, very few 1 mana creatures with activated abilities, but that'll come into additions. However, I do like the curve as a whole. Now, let's talk about some ideas kind of a bit out of order. The first thing I want to talk about is mana base, colors, and 5-color decks. Now, our deck builder has said that they don't have a budget for the deck. So in this case, I'm very keen on just saying, hey, why not put in fetch lands? You can play up to 10 fetch lands really, really easily, and they will generally fix your mana problems pretty well. And in essence, I want to say that's kind of it. If you don't have a budget, might as well go and build a really strong mana base and, reap the rewards of that. However, there is another element that I think is pretty important to think about. And what that is understanding that our 5-color commander deck is not necessarily a 5-color commander deck. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean objectively, if we really, really wanted to, we could say that the color we need is white, right, for Tazri, and then creatures with activated abilities can tap for our other colors. So if we wanted to, this could be a monocolor deck that uses Tazri's ability to hedge our bets with the other colors. Now, we're not going to do that, obviously. I don't think we should be, but we can follow this train of thought a little longer, right? Something I really like when we look at our non-creature spells is they're almost all green, and at most are green and. We have a few exceptions. Vanquish the Horde board clears are not very accessible in green. I think this could be Blasphemous Act. I think this could just not be in the deck as we are already very weak to board clears. I don't really feel a need to play them, but a safety valve is nice, so having one isn't terrible. We could even play a green board clear if we wanted. There are a few, they're not great, but they do exist if we chose to go into that direction, right? Path to Exile, I really do think this should be Swords to Plowshares. Perhaps our deck builder thinks that there are situations where they might path their own creature to fix their mana. However, I feel that's sketchy, so I'd rather it be Swords to Plowshares, or just like Dismember, right? Dismember is colorless and 4 life, and therefore we reduce the stress of the colors a little more. That being said, obviously white is the best of these because we need it for Tazri, so we're already having it in mind. Angish Unmaking, I'm suggesting, and I'll suggest it again when we get to it, Beast Within, but once again, we just don't need this 2-color pip card in our non-creature spells, right? If these were just all green, there would just be a really easy way to just think, hey, once I have that 1 or 2 green cards, I have access to almost every one of my non-creature spells. Even Assassin's Trophy is a lot easier to stomach because green is given. Like, we need that green for a number of these spells, so we're really seeing it as just kind of a black card. Like, we need 1 black pip, which we can kind of find throughout our our deck. I keep forgetting, I said earlier that our creatures can help pay for our colors, but I keep forgetting that they can't. They can pay for the activated abilities of other creatures. My goodness, they really didn't want Tazri to be strong. So, looking at this green setup, I can say, and I'm going to make a lot of suggestions that are green, that you could follow the same kind of mechanical, idea in our creature setup. We can actually, a suggestion I didn't think of, speaking of green, we could be playing Grist, a Grist that is a creature in the library, and therefore Tazri's ability will see her as a creature with an activated ability and put her in our hand, and she's very strong. So that's an addition that's not in the list. But regardless, looking through these creatures, we can kind of see that I would like more of them just to be green, if possible. Not every single one of them can be green, but we have some creatures that, honestly, I'm not particularly impressed by. Like, Intrepid Hero probably is sometimes a sleeper hit, but other times is not really gonna hold up a really strong presence in the game, because if Intrepid Hero is good, he's dead. And if Intrepid Hero is bad, I guess you're like choosing between 6 or 7 creatures to destroy, and your opponents don't really mind, right? Because if they did mind, they would destroy the Intrepid Hero. And if they don't mind, then you're just like taking out a 6/6 worm or something like that every turn, and they're just like, we'll play more, right? So when the option comes up, my heart says like, why play these cards when we could play more green ones to take a bit of the stress off of the mana base, right? Moving on to the next topic before we go into cards that I just want to cut out, and this is the concept, and this is an important one for players of any deck building to consider, is the ability to have a variety of win conditions, A, and B, to have those win conditions not be combo. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not entirely sure, because the deck builder said that they wanted a non-combo way to win with activated abilities. So I have to assume what they mean by that is that they want a instant combo that immediately mills everyone's libraries or something like that, Thassa's Oracle style or something like that, or Hangerback Walker would be just a better example. Or sorry, I said Hangerback Walker. I meant Walking Ballista style combos or Yawgmoth style combos. That's just an infinite combo and happens to have activated abilities. That's what I assume they mean, because activated abilities by every definition are going to require a combination of activated abilities to work together to do anything, right? Because every individual activated ability is just kind of so-so, with a few exceptions, like notably Captivating Crew, if you can activate this enough times, is phenomenal. It's just, take control of all creatures on the battlefield and win the game. Big fan of that. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, also is something that says, hey, if you have infinite mana, get +1/+1 counters infinitely on all creatures. You may be catching a theme here where a lot of activated abilities, like the combos that don't go infinite immediately, require you having either infinite mana, or which makes them infinite, or a tremendous amount of mana where it just doesn't matter that it's finite, right? There's a certain point when you activate Shalai 35 times that there's just not a difference between that and a million times, right? Not always. I'm sure there's corner cases Magic players will be keen to say, but generally I think there's just this point that it doesn't matter that you couldn't keep going if you can, whatever 35 times 6 is, if you can feed that much mana into her, you've probably won the game. And with that in mind, it becomes this problem, going back to the first part of the two-part, is what kind of alternative win cons should we have in our decks, or what kind of win conditions should our decks reach for? And in a deck like this, there's not a lot of options. Our plate is kind of lean, right? Because our entire premise of our deck requires having creatures. As a whole, way more than every other thing, and creatures that fall in a very specific category, those with those colons in there, so they have activated abilities. Now, not always, but traditionally, creatures with activated abilities are weaker in terms of combat than creatures without, right? Once again, not always the case. Shalai also stands out as being a pretty decent beater, while providing really cool abilities. But as a whole, if we think of Mana Dorks, if we think of, Drum Bellower is the other permanent. Yeah, I knew there was another one stopping us from Zerda. Same mechanic though, Drum Bellower and Quest for Renewal, both doing the same thing. Anyways, cards like Kami of the False Hope and Spore Frog, very good creatures, are just not winning games of Magic, right? They need a lot of support to do so. And that puts us kind of on the back foot of combat. So how do we win with this very creature-focused deck that needs our creatures to stay on the battlefield? And the answer is most likely to use a setup of the combination of cards to kind of work together and amass an endless board that your opponents are not prepared for. And that's complicated, right? We're in this situation where we have a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that don't particularly work individually really well, but as a whole, when you dump them all together, they do something greater than the sum of their parts. So, with that in mind, I think the directions to go is either we completely invest in making this a combo deck, which the deck builder doesn't seem to want to do, or we make this kind of a combat, kind of a fighting deck, maybe bring in equipment, things like that to kind of create this build where we're playing all of these creatures that are very good, and then we're going to try to set them up to build towards combat. However, both of those set up a complete restructuring of the deck. That's not really what we do on these EDH like deck assists. If you would like me to make you a deck, that's an option. Email me, we'll talk about it. But when it comes to this kind of thing, I don't like completely restructuring decks. So those are my ideas to cover those things. We've taken a long time. Let's talk about the deck list as is and what I think kind of sticks out and doesn't. So as often in these kind of decks, I like looking at the back end and kind of going downward, right? Because I want the cards that we're investing the most mana in to do the most kind of things. And Zacama is kind of is the poster child of the struggle this deck has, right? Zacama is a very powerful creature. However, a lot of their power relies on how strong untapping all the lands you control is, and how many times that you can activate these abilities in a row. Because if you can drop Zacama, float a bunch of mana, untap all your lands, all of a sudden you blow up everyone's like Rhystic Studies, their Smothering Ties, their Mana Rocks and everything, and then you start pinging down their creatures as well. If you can do this enough times, you've gotten a really good amount of board control, and you have a 9/9 in play. Very, very strong. However, this deck kind of has a hard time with this because it wants to operate on a slightly different axis. Like, don't get me wrong, it wants to activate Zacama's abilities as many times as humanly possible. It wants to copy them onto other creatures and things like that. It just doesn't care about this untap all lands you control trigger, right? It wants to invest the mana by tapping its creatures to do so. And there's a bit of a problem here, right? The opportunity cost of tapping a creature for mana, which is 1 mana, versus a lot of our other creatures' natural activated abilities, such as Loran, it's just way worse, right? Like, if you're tapping Loran for like 1 mana for a third of a Zacama ability, like, that's infinitely worse than drawing a card, right? You just don't want to ever do that. And if we were going to be like using Inga and Eski to all of a sudden, this is 1 mana. I was pretty sure there's one I thought that added 2 mana, but regardless, like, if we're using even creatures that say like your creatures tap to add 2 mana or something like that, we're still in that situation where it's just like, and we're using it on Zacama, right? Like, shouldn't we have something else? Like, Zacama is the top end in a deck that has like 15 lands, so that tremendous untap ability is insane and like just rains mana that you can use while you hold up like Ephemerate or a Cloud Shift to blink Zacama and, you know, float even more mana. Like, that's what we want to do here. Zacama themselves has 2 good abilities and 1 bad ability, which we don't even want to use, right? So like, just as this kind of top end is kind of failing to do what we wanted to do, whereas something like Hate Flare is way better, right? Like so much better. And to me, I would say kind of an infinite combo, because if you can just generate enough mana, Hate Flare does 5 damage to a player over and over again in response to anything. So just in my mind, just between those two, just the comparison between Zacama and Hate Flare shows us kind of the unbalanced nature of the deck, which I think I'll go through the rest kind of quickly, but this is kind of a universal theme. Once again, let's look at Samut. Samut is incredibly strong, a very strong beater, has a fantastic like flash in at the end of a turn. All of a sudden she's attacking for 6 every turn, and that's if she doesn't have like a way to boost her power, which you often want to. That's also saying like that giving all your other creatures haste isn't also incredibly important, which is in my mind the only part of this you care about. She just belongs in a different deck. This is a smash face deck because like if Samut's your commander, you're gonna flash her out, equip her, immediately start smashing across the field and maybe start taking out players. With Double Strike, you just need to give her about 8 extra power, which is way more doable than you think, so that she one-shots players. If you want to tone that down a little bit, the second you give her 3 additional power, she's two-shotting players. I mean, two-shotting is hitting twice, like 2 combats, not like twice as in she has Double Strike. You follow what I mean. So Samut kind of sticks out as being like quite an underpowered card for this deck. But then we have Kendrith the Returned King, who kind of shows up and is just way better than Samut in every conceivable way. Yes, it's not a static text that gives haste to all your creatures, but it also gives trample, and 1 red mana is really easy to activate, and has a bunch of abilities that are very, very relevant for this deck, and I would say has a more powerful version of the dinosaurs, you know, gain 3, Kendrith gains 5. Like, it's just kind of night and day between these cards. And it's just, if we just keep going down, we're going to find that repeatedly to be true. There's going to be some cool versions where we're kind of like, oh, this is a neat way to tap down a bunch of cards and like basically fog a player, versus cards that are just much more like, okay, we're going to mass flood the board to the point that our opponents no longer have any way to attack us anyways, and at the same time that we're doing this, we're going to be making even more mana. Like, this is just, once again, way stronger and just not comparable. And I know you might be saying, well, Curse, not every card in a deck can be the strongest card in the deck. I would just say that there does feel to be a little bit of polarism in going around in this deck. I would say definitely we've got cards here like Patrol Signaler that once again feels just a little cute for what it does. The White Kithkin, unlike the Mercenary token, doesn't have any activated abilities, and therefore we're just making bodies for 1 mana at a time, which isn't bad, but also, like, what are you doing? When are you gonna have all of this mana to make 6 1/1s when you should be instead building your board, right? I just feel like there's a bit of like back and forth here. Likeness Looter and Lasav once again feels kind of strange in a non-combo deck where we're just going to like be trying to copy some really good cards, but probably belongs a lot more in a deck that has a much higher ceiling, right? They also kind of have a little bit of a Nombo with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, but I don't mind because that ability is really strong. You just need strong cards to use it with. And finally, like, once again, that same feeling that we have like Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, a game changer card, an incredibly powerful card, a CDH level, and we are at the same time playing a few other cards like Beast Strike Vanguard, right? Like, it's just, it feels a little back and forth. I think, before we go into additions, I think my honest take is that if you don't want to play combo, I really do recommend making this into like an equipment deck, because then you get to have a lot of fun, unique cards, a very fun, unique way of playing Tazri, because there's a lot of creatures with activated abilities that work with artifacts that you're going to have a lot of satisfaction with, and it's still going to feel like this deck. It also gets to go like primarily white green, and therefore once again less stress on the mana base, and like with red in it for some other equipment stuff, and I think that would be a lot of fun. But alternatively, you could just go into comp. I just don't think you can kind of do both. If you do want me to build that equipment deck for you, just send me a message, because I think it would be a lot of fun. Like, I'm already thinking about it and I do kind of like it. All right, let's go into additions, and the first one is possibly the most boring one of all. We should just play Mana Dorks. I know it's a little wild. I know it doesn't work with Tazri's second ability, but in my opinion, who cares? Cards that already tap for mana when Tazri is not out is really good. Also, these Mana Dorks help you cast your creatures with activated abilities, because once again, that's not how Tazri works. So that can make a very big difference. Likewise, giving these creatures extra activated abilities is really good as well, because those activated abilities through like Agatha's Soul Cauldron and things like that are also just really helpful to have them on a number of different styles of creatures, so that you can kind of invest in smaller creatures to get them to do what you want, while like slowly putting out the bigger and bigger creatures that your opponent has to worry about. It's like a diversity thing, right? Finally, like having a 1 mana dork allows you to play Tazri on turn 2, which I think is really relevant. You can play, I would say, safely 4 of these kind of cards without feeling bad at all, and I would argue some of this will also just improve your mana base and your colors pretty easily. Going in, I did add Grist. I took a moment to go in and add Grist. I really do recommend Grist. I think she is an immensely powerful Planeswalker. I think she does something kind of interesting that this deck kind of struggles with by creating a slow board and just kind of creating a situation where your opponents have to kind of watch her like a ticking clock, because at a certain point, this -5 is very, very dangerous when half your deck is creatures. It gives you payoffs for milling. And finally, you now have like a repeatable way to destroy creatures, which I think is worthwhile. Also, if you've never seen Grist on Agatha's Cauldron, it is insane. She is so strong, where you can just like start generating a ton of 1/1 insects turn after turn, and then if that just sticks around, then you turn all those insects into just like kill spells by down ticking all of your creatures. And I think it's really, really good. I think she's a very nice addition. You're going to be noticing a theme. There's going to be a lot of green cards here. Zimone and Dina is another one that I wanted to suggest. I think once again, there is something a little interesting here that I do like. I think she gets to reprocess some of these tokens you're creating that aren't too impressive or they get to reprocess these tokens that you're just have lying around. Like once again, those 1/1 Kithkin tokens are never going to do anything meaningful. But Zimone and Dina turn that into card draw and into extra land drops, which this deck desperately needs. Also, just being kind of like a little bit of a reward for drawing cards, even when she's not activating, is pretty nice. But I think as a repeatable ramp creature that fits into your theme and allows you to work with your graveyard a little more, I do like them. I really like Zimone and Dina. I've never gotten to play with them, but I think this card is really, really interesting, and like I'm not sure what I would build out of her because because it feels a little narrow. Still, let's keep going. Chulane, I think, is very notably missing here. I think Chulane by themselves is incredibly powerful for this deck and fits the theme really, really well. Chulane allows us to start getting more and more advantage by the ways that we are just wanting to play the deck, right? You just want to cast creatures, and so therefore here is a way that you can just start casting creatures and getting benefits from it while having a really cool effect of returning creatures you control back to your hand. So Chulane becomes kind of this defensive creature while still like getting you a bunch of value, and its natural vigilance allows him to attack sometimes, though often you don't want to, but is really, really cool. I think Chulane kind of was in our collective mind for a little bit, and then we all forgot about Chulane because we moved past those brawl decks. But I think Chulane is still really, really good. I think like Chulane reminds me of Prosper a lot. I think maybe they were just around the same time, but just an immensely powerful creature that we just don't see very often because their decks are kind of straightforward. So why not put Chulane into your deck, which I think is a lot of fun. Another one, once again, heavy in green, that I think is very, very worthwhile, and maybe more on the combo side, is Fiend Artisan. I'm going to talk about Fiend Artisan, but I think there's also a note for anything like Fauna Shaman and cards like that. Creatures with activated abilities that allow you to search through your deck for a creature card, like Tutor. If you are going on the combo side, these cards, I would say, are kind of necessary just to exist. They're just really powerful cards that allow your deck to function reliably and quickly, and are must-answer threats for your opponents, which forces them to spend their removal on things so that you can continue playing the game. Fiend Artisan, I think, is notably strong because it allows you once again to change those weaker activated ability creatures for the stronger ones. All of a sudden, I don't mind, like, especially like the mana dorks we have at the start, being just transformed into something else that's just way, way more valuable and that you're going to be way happier. And I think it's pretty good. I think this whole Fiend Artisan growing thing, you're not going to worry about that. That doesn't particularly matter, but I mean, sometimes it'll be like a decent threat, which will be nice. However, these kind of abilities I think are rather good. One of the ones that is not green that I do feel inclined to bring up is Ruthless Technomancer. Ruthless Technomancer is an immensely powerful card. If you haven't been able to play with it, I really do recommend trying it. It's pretty cheap. Its ability to turn one creature into a number of treasure tokens, is very strong. And then that secondary ability of turning artifacts for 3 mana into a reanimation spell is also really, really good. I really think people underestimate how powerful this is, because just like in this deck alone, for 2 and a black and 1 artifact, which will probably be the treasure token that came out of the Ruthless Technomancer, you can reanimate Kami of the Last Hope of the frog, Spore Frog, so you have a fog effect at any time as long as those cards are in your graveyard. And just the threat of that, I think, is good enough, right? I think it's a very powerful threat that will make opponents like kind of think twice from attacking you, or think twice about attacks that they really need to connect. So like, you know, ones that allow them to have extra combats, or like old Gnaw Bones generates them a bunch of treasures. You can threaten to kind of turn that attack off, is really good. That's not even including things like Sakura Tribe Elder or other creatures that might have sack effects. Boromir comes to mind and things like that, which Ruthless Technomancer threatens to allow to happen over and over and over again, which is really, really good. Obviously, if you can reanimate, blink, or do anything with Ruthless Technomancer to put it back into play, is also really, really good, because the more times this triggers, the happier you are. However, still a fantastic card. Unfortunately, it's a little tricky to loop this, even if you give the other creature, like Marvin gets this ability, because Ruthless Technomancer can't sacrifice itself, which means it has to come in, sacrifice something, then you have to let the Ruthless Technomancer die, and then Marvin can reanimate it, getting more, and so on and so forth. But once again, it's not that kind of deck. Don't worry about it. Technomancer is fantastic. I said before, Beast Within I think is particularly good. It is worth considering. Good times. Okay. Song of Freyalise, I think, is very, very neat here. I will note that this does not have an activated ability for players who are using Zerda, but still, in this current iteration of the deck, I think it's pretty good. So, for Asaga 1 and 2, it turns all of your creatures into Birds of Paradise, which once again is better than what Tazri does, so that's already pretty strong, and it allows you to build up boards. Then, that third mode puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature. Those creatures get Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. This allows you to get generally one pretty safe attack in, and in my experiences playing Song of Freyalise in like Hapatra and a bunch of other decks, is that this allows you to get a swing of like 14 or 15 in if Song of Freyalise came out early, and with almost no downside. Like there's no fear about that attack. Of course, there's situations that someone might cast Settle the Wreckage, but in those situations, there's absolutely nothing you could do about it, so don't worry about it. Most of the times, this is just a free attack that's pretty meaningful, and then you go to your second main phase, and you can still tap those creatures, do things with them, so on and so forth. So, Song of Freyalise, I think, is particularly strong. A comparison would be Cryptolith Rites, which you could also play, which is an enchantment that all your creatures are Birds of Paradise. Pretty good, but in this current setup, I kind of like Song of Freyalise a little more because it encourages you to be aggressive in your plays. Another one that I tend to pair along with Song of Freyalise, like similar types of decks, is Evolutionary Leap. This is a card I feel like I recommend a lot, and I'm going to continuously recommend it. Evolutionary Leap, my goodness. Evolutionary Leap is a phenomenally powerful card that just doesn't seem as strong as it is. So the way it works is that as long as you can maintain 1 green mana at least, it makes it so anytime someone tries to kill one of your creatures, you get to draw the next creature in your deck instead, right? It's as if they still killed the creature, you just sacrifice it, and then you get to draw a card, which is already really, really good. But this also means on turns where someone is going to board wipe, or you're anticipating a board wipe, you can hold up like 5 or 6 green mana, and then once that board wipe is on the stack, hopefully it doesn't get countered after the fact, but because that's happened to me recently, but you can sacrifice all the creatures that would die anyways and turn them into like 5 or 6 creature cards in your hand. Obviously, the last thing, I brought this up before, I'll bring it up again, the ability to use this on tokens, on mana dorks, or other creatures you just don't care about in the late game to kind of shuffle them into the next creature, the more powerful creature. It's going to be very, very good. This, of course, also has an activated ability, so it plays well with companions, so I do like that. Very strong card. Finally, I wanted to briefly talk about kind of a hole this deck has that there's no way around, and that's our reliance on creatures, and a reliance on a creature board, and a reliance on a creature board that doesn't attack a lot. So what this all adds up together is that board clears are really, really good against us, because we're like an engine deck that that is vulnerable to Blasphemous Act, to Anger of the Gods, to any like 5 damage across the board effects. All of these smaller board clears always not hurt us really badly, but also big board clears also just wreck us. So I want to have some kind of mass reanimation spell. At the moment, Eerie Ultimatum's here kind of as a placeholder. It doesn't need to be this one. If you're kind of like hungry, you could go and get Rise of the Dark Realms, which is just always the case. If you're kind of in the middle, you could do like Living Death, where it wipes the board and reanimates all your creatures that were already in the graveyard. That could be cool. But I think you should have at least one of them. I know white has a few, but I didn't really see any that really caught my eye. I suppose there is the Aftermath card, Dust Till Dawn, or Dust to Dawn. I think that one could work here, but it might not. You'll have to see. You'll have to look at the power of your creatures to make it work. I just think we should be playing 1 or 2 of these effects, because there's just going to be situations where we're just out of gas and that's it. The game is pretty much over for us, and that's rough. There is a way that we just accept that and just say, hey, this deck just operates on a power level that if you run into a series of board wipes, the game is over. But we could also say that, you know, we're in the colors to have a lot of options. We might as well have a mass reanimation spell. This could be alternative. You could play Teferi's Protection. You could play some counter magic, things like this. But I really do like Eerie Ultimatum because it lets you invest in kind of a self-mill sub-theme that the deck can naturally have that I think is very good. Finally, Stoneforge Mystic, just to remind one more time that I really do think it would be fun to make an equipment deck out of this. And that's it. That's it. I do like this deck, and I want it to work well. I think it's trying to be too many things right now, and the glue that holds together a theme deck is really, really important, right? Like when we think of decks where you want all your creatures to have flying, the flying payoffs gotta be good. If we want all of our creatures to have Death Touch, the Death Touch payoffs have to be good. This is a deck that wants all of your creatures to have activated abilities, and the payoffs, well, they're really reliant on infinite combos, and the deck builder doesn't want that, it seems. If you want the infinite combos, get Zerda, get the, it's not an Obelisk, the 3 mana, taps for 3 mana, untaps for 3 mana, I can't remember what it, a Grim Monolith, hey, got it. Get that combo, make infinite mana, win the game, you're super, super happy. Lots of good times there. There's a million other infinite combos that win you the game. However, if you're not interested in that, activated abilities are kind of tough to work with. They don't really give you a lot of, you know, cohesion or glue that keeps decks together. And instead, we're kind of built around a number of very, very powerful activated ability enablers and a number of very, very strong activated abilities that that put us in situations that we are reliant on a small number of our cards to succeed. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but then I would have to ask you, why are you playing 40 creatures then? Like, I would remove all of the weaker activated ability creatures that are in there for flavor and replace it with counter magic, protection spells, control, things like that that enable you to get your plan. Those are my thoughts. I do like the deck. I hope to see another draft of this because I think there's a lot of directions that we go into, and I'm excited to see more. All right, thank you so much. Happy deck building, and good luck. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.